Hello, everybody. Can everybody see me, hear me okay, I hope? Sorry, I was trying to do something a little different tonight. That didn't work out, and so I had to run back down here. Is everybody doing okay? See all kinds of names and people tuning in. That's kind of cool. It's awesome. I love it. I trust everybody has had a great day today. Kind of a, I don't know, dreary day to some degree. Cut some of this light back here. Hope y'all are doing well. Doing all right. It's been an interesting day today. Been a good day, long day. So I hope you guys are doing okay, staying healthy, happy. Hopefully you guys are still in the same bedroom with your spouse. The kids aren't buried out in the back of the swamp like mine probably could be. Just kidding. But glad that y'all are doing well. Glad that y'all are still tuning in and keeping up with everything and enjoying life in this new age that we're doing life in. And it's just interesting how things come about and how we have to adjust quickly. But I think the greatest thing to consider in all this is you have adjusted quickly. You've made an adjustment that was necessary, that was safe, and we're doing it. I mean, we're 8 weeks into this thing, 8 weeks of quarantine, which is beyond my comprehension and understanding. However, it is what it is. And we're still friends. We still love each other. We're still doing life and look forward to being able to gather again together someday soon, hopefully. Hopefully all this mess will just go away. And the reality is the virus is always going to be around. It's always going to be here. It's just a new normal that we're going to have to create. And what that looks like going forward, I have no idea. But we're at least on the right side of the grass. And so that's always important to me when I wake up in the morning to make sure I'm on the right side of the grass. Tomorrow, I didn't know if you knew it or not, but tomorrow is the national or international or just the day of prayer. It is the day where it is set aside. It's a national day of prayer. And I want to encourage you, if you have time tomorrow, set some time aside. I know that Franklin Graham has set aside 8 to 10 tomorrow night for people to join in prayer together. I'm sure you can find a lot online about that. But I would encourage you tomorrow. I know you've been praying probably more than you've ever prayed before, but I would encourage you tomorrow, if you could just set aside 5, 10, 30, an hour, whatever, any kind of time you can set aside. Just spend some time in prayer. Pray for whatever you feel like you need to pray for. Just want to encourage you to do that. Prayer is an important aspect of our Christian walk. It's the thing that kind of helps us keep connected with God and allows us to peer deep within our own hearts and souls and allows the Spirit to speak for us on the things that we don't even know that's going on. So I would encourage you, spend some time in prayer. It is our direct communication with God, and tell him what you're feeling, tell him what you're thinking, tell him whatever you want to tell him. Just have that conversation. But maybe we should be praying on behalf of those that can't pray, maybe those that are sick or suffering, or maybe it's other situations you need to pray about. But just take the opportunity tomorrow as the National Day of Prayer to spend some time in serious prayer about all kinds of stuff. If you don't know what to pray for, you can pray for us, and trying to figure out when to come back to church and how to do it and what it looks like, and the safest, easiest route to do it. There's just a lot to think about and a lot to consider. Don't forget, tomorrow is Announcement Thursday. Our announcement video will be out tomorrow. It's going to be different than probably any other video announcement we've done. It's a little more on the serious side. Try not to be too serious about it, but it's just things to think about, things to consider. So glad to see all you guys are on here. And man, these lights are killing me tonight. And so we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 7. We're going to continue on. So glad to see everybody on the side of my screen over here. Everybody saying hi. So I'm just going to say hi to everybody else because I'm sure I will miss a few. But glad that you're here. Let's open up in a word of prayer, and then we will get into Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Let's pray. God, I appreciate all that you do and how you are just amazing. And then the busyness of our lives and the chaos that we live in right now and the so many unknowns, God, you are the only constant that remains the same. The one constant that we can cling to, knowing that it is immovable and unshakable. Lord, may our faith be that way in you. May our trust in who you are and how you operate be unshakable. And God, tonight as we crawl through chapter 7, there's so many great things to think about and consider from Solomon. Lord, I pray that you would just allow our minds to not just rest on the things that we're experiencing right here, right now in this pandemic, but God, help us to take a step back and see the bigger picture of all that he's trying to help us to understand. And I pray that your wisdom would go forth tonight, give us understanding and knowledge tonight as only you can. In Jesus' name, amen. So Ecclesiastes chapter 7 is the chapter that we're on. Chapter 6 was a great chapter. And so we are going to start with verse 1. And here's what verse 1 says. It says, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. So we've kind of had this opportunity that Solomon has taken us on this journey of helping us understand the vanity of life. And he has lived life to its fullest. He's exercised his right to do and to search out all that he wants to search out. And he kind of talks about that at the end of chapter 7. And he's figuring out that everything that we feel like is going to make us happy, all the things that we strive for is kind of vain. It's worthless and useless. And the only real thing that's lasting is going after God. And so chapter 7 starts a different trend in his talking. It almost reminds us of the Proverbs and the way that the Proverbs were written, kind of a statement, and then maybe a statement with some explanation, and then another statement. So it's all tied in together, but it's more statement oriented as we go through here. And he starts right off the bat with the idea that a good name or having a solid reputation is better than precious ointment. And when I think about a good name or a good reputation, I go back to Proverbs 22:1 that talks about a good name is more valuable than any kind of riches you could ever think of. And I've used this passage a lot in talking with teenagers, talking about how having a good reputation is more important than anything, because the moment that your reputation is marred, it's marred for life. That's how people will always remember that thing. Unfortunately, even as good as you might be, they will always remember the bad or the negative or the good or the positive. But they will always remember that thing. And Solomon is trying to help us to see that, look, a good name is something that not everybody can get. It takes hard work. You have to be wise. You have to make good decisions. And to earn a good reputation, you have to do what is right and do the hard stuff. But then he says it's more precious than a precious ointment. And I want you to think of it this way. When I have cologne on, I'm the one wearing the cologne, but everyone around me gets to experience, hopefully, how good it smells. And even if you want to take body odor, like if I have a bad attitude or body odor, everyone around me is going to know that. And so what he's talking about here is finding and striving for a good reputation, to be well known, to be trustworthy, for people to know that when they hear the name Alan Hines, hopefully they see that and know that that's a good dude. But that is to be strived for more than just being nice, where everybody can experience it and then it kind of goes away. And so he says here that, look, having a good name, a good reputation is far better than just being able to ooze out a little bit of goodness where people will smell it, but then it goes away. Then he says, the day of death better than the day of one's birth. Now that's kind of contrary to us. It's weird that we think of it that way, that it's better to be, or at the day of death, than to be born. But in our world's view, death is the worst thing that can happen to you, and birth is the best because it's the happy, it's the new life. And Solomon is changing that mindset, and he says it could be that birth is the worst thing, because in that moment, as wonderful and as precious as that little life is, there is so much life ahead of him that is scary and unknown. And so many things that young life is going to experience and have to go through, that when we face death, it is over. All that is behind us is done. All that we've experienced is over. Life is over as we know it. And now we get to experience life with Christ. All of that is done. And so it's just an interesting phrase. It's an interesting thought. This is Solomon taking on all the things that he's ever experienced. And he's coming to this conclusion that, you know what? It's almost as if he pities the baby because he knows the life that's going to be ahead of him. He doesn't know how good or bad this kid is. He just knows that life in general is hard and it's unfair and it's mean and it's just hard. But death is the finale. It's done. All of that is over. All of that grief and frustration and hard life is over. And he continues on. He says, better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. What? That is such a strange way to say this. He says, when we go to parties, when we go to celebrations, it's hard for us to take it all in because there's so much going on. This person's happy for this reason, and this person's remembering this, and all these celebrations, and all we're feeling is the happy emotions, and we bounce from side to side to side to side. But when we go to the house of mourning, meaning when we go to a funeral, is kind of where I take it. Or maybe back in the day when they would go to homes and they had the wakes and they would stay up all night. Listen, when you're in that moment at a funeral, the only thing that we are able to do is to think about our own mortality in that moment. It forces us, it makes us think about our past life, what we are doing right here, right now, and the life ahead. The person that is there that we're celebrating is dead. There's nothing more that can be done. But we have a responsibility to think thoroughly through our own life and to consider what we are doing. Is it important or is it not? But when we're at a party, we're not thinking about that stuff. We're not thinking about what's coming next or what just happened. We're thinking about the here and now. And he's simply saying, listen, if we're going to get all out of this life that we can, we have to consider and live life somewhat serious, but also experience the goodness of life that exists as well. It says, verse 3, sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always heard that laughter is medicine. It's good medicine. In fact, Proverbs talks about that. It's good for our soul. But Solomon changes the tune a little bit. So is he saying that it's better to be sad than to laugh? That's not what he's saying at all. He's talking about sorrow, sadness, again, forces us to consider what is really happening and what is going on. When I'm happy, I'm not thinking about all the negativity in my life. I'm not thinking about all the hard stuff in my life. It's almost like an escape. But when I'm sad or when I'm brokenhearted or when I'm really focused on something, that is when I'm able to focus on the things that is most important. So you may be thinking, Alan, are you saying it's not good to be happy? It's not what I'm saying at all. I think we should be happy. But I think we should not, I don't think we should discount those times of sorrow and despair. And really, when we're grieving, those are perfect opportunities to consider what is truly most important in this life. And when we're laughing and happy, it's hard for us to focus on the serious things of life. In other words, Solomon's just sharing right off the bat in chapter 7, we got to have a balance. There's got to be a balance to all of this. There's got to be a balance to being serious in life and a balance to just enjoying the fun in life. Verse 4, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Again, he's continuing with this idea of, listen, those people that take advantage of the hard times in life, they have those hard conversations either with themselves or somebody else, or they go to counseling to try to fix the issues in their life, or they seek out wisdom and guidance and wise counsel of the hard stuff in their life. Excuse me. Those are the people that are going to grow the most. But the ones that are just trying to live for the thrill of life and live for the joy of excitement and the thrill seekers, they're not going to grow very much because they're not dealing with the things that are most important. Now, I will be the first to tell you it is hard for me to talk about things that are deep-seated within me. because I don't want to talk about those things because they make me sad and they bring up old stuff. But I have learned over the last 5 to 10 years that if I don't deal with those things, I will forever be stuck in a rut that I don't want to be in. And Solomon is saying, listen, you can try to cover up all those things by just living life to the fullest and experiencing life however you want to experience it. But the reality is, unless you take time to deal with the serious matters of your life, you're going to miss out. There are going to be things that you're going to miss. The growth that you're hoping for and the growth that you're trying to win by just partying and experiencing the good things in life, you're going to miss out, because true growth happens in the hard stuff. He's not saying we always have to be serious and mopey and down. And he's saying, look, be realistic. Take the times when they're there to grow and take the times when they're there to enjoy life, but have a balance in it all. He says in verse 5, and there's so many verses that are going along these lines. He says, it is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like to be rebuked. It's not my favorite, as Emma would say. It's not my favorite. I don't like when my team has to come to me and say, hey, the way you handled this wasn't best. Or, hey, I know that you want to deal with it this way. It might be better to try it this way. That's hard for us because we want to be right in everything that we do. We want that first time to be the perfect time. And the truth of the matter is we don't do everything right. We always don't do things perfect. And so there's a great thing behind being challenged or encouraged or rebuked by a wise person, somebody that's lived life or has some experience with that. It's better. And Randy throws out a good point. He says, constructive criticism versus false or exaggerated affirmation. It's nice to be praised, but constructive criticism is opportunity for growth. And I would absolutely say that. In fact, I would take it a step further. I would say I would much rather have constructive criticism, as much as it's going to pain me, than for you to blow my ego up and make me go in a direction that is not safe for me or right for me. Like, totally agree with that, Randy. That's a perfect point. Constructive criticism is better for us than an inflated, exaggerated statement that has nothing to do with anything. That's really a waste of space and air and time. Solomon would say it's vanity. Verse 6, he says, for like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Now, I don't know about you, but there's nothing better for me than to sit by a crackling fire. I love sitting by a fire. I love poking in a fire and throwing sticks on the fire and making the fire as big as I can make it. I'm a little bit of a pyro. I just love the crackling of a fire. And he's making the statement of the crackling of thorns or the crackling of fire is so short-lived. It's kind of like laughter. When you laugh so hard that you're crying, it feels great in the moment. But the moment that moment is gone, you're waiting for the next one. It's fleeting. It's short-lived. And that's exactly what he's talking about here. He's talking about, listen, you can go and have fun at the party and be distracted for a little while, but guess what? You're only going to be distracted for a little while. You're still going to have to deal with that issue that's deep within you or that somebody rebuked you on. You've got to deal with those things. Laughter and happiness and those type of things only last for a short period of time. It is imperative that we, as followers of God, as people that are trying to grow, as people that are trying to be better, and really what he's going to get to is people that are trying to live in righteousness, we have to deal with the hard things in life. We can't cover them up, throw them by the wayside, and accept or believe that they're just going to go away, because they're not. They're always going to be there unless we deal with them and grow from them. Life's hard. Life is tough. And we need to face things like that head on. Just deal with them. It's going to be better off for us in the long run. Then verse 7, he says, surely oppression destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. Now, I read two different commentaries on this. I read Albert Barnes, which I always read, and then I started reading a little bit of Matthew Henry, who is super wordy, but it's really good. And so they kind of differed a little bit. Matthew Henry had two different takes. One of them agreed with Albert Barnes. And Albert Barnes said something along the lines of that when a man is wise and he is using his wisdom to continue to kind of be better and use it to do really well, when that man, that wise man who knows what he's doing, is confident in his wisdom, is oppressed by other things, that wise man is going to be able to withstand that for quite a while. But at some point, it's possible that this wise man has a breaking point and he will respond however he responds, which is, I can see that. Henry comes at it from the idea of that it would be foolish for a wise man to be the oppressor, that his wise man, that his wisdom has got him to a certain spot, and now he is turning away from that wisdom because of the elevation of who he is, and now he is oppressing people outside of his normal wisdom. That's a fair statement. I can go with either one of those. I'm happy with both of those. And so it's interesting that Solomon says that we have to be careful with our wisdom. We've got to be careful in our reactions and careful in how we use how our wisdom may elevate us to some degree. But then he says that a bribe debases the heart. A bribe kind of takes away from, it lowers the character. So when we take bribes or we allow somebody to kind of manipulate the situation, or we manipulate the situation, it kind of takes away from our character. We kind of, I don't want to say let it down, but we kind of have. We've gone from this spot of, I'm using my wisdom, I'm doing what is right. Well, that kind of fits what I want. And so I'm going to kind of take this bribe or go in a different direction. And now it's kind of lowered our character. It goes back to verse 1 for me and what I've used with teenagers of, listen, once you make that decision to do something different than what your reputation says that you are, now you've lowered your reputation. You have taken it from this excellent spot of having good character, and now I don't want to say you've ruined it, but man, you've put it in a spot that now you've got some extra hard work. And then sometimes we have ruined it. Sometimes we've ruined our reputation to the point that it's almost irreparable. And that's what we want to avoid as much as we possibly can. And so he says, hey, a bribe and oppression has the chance to kind of mess things up. And so be very careful with that. Then he goes again to verse 8. He says, the end of a thing is better than the beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Now, I don't know about you, but it's kind of weird that the end of a thing is better than the beginning. So what comes to mind are a couple of things. When I am getting ready to shoot the videos or go live, I always feel better at the end than I do at the beginning. Why? Because it's done. It's over. I don't have to do it again until next Friday morning or next Wednesday. So, yeah, I get that. But then I go a different route, and I think about like a roller coaster. Think about a roller coaster. Those of you like roller coasters. When you first get on the roller coaster, there's this feeling of angst, this worry, this, oh my goodness, I don't know what it's going to be, especially if it's the first time you've ever ridden it. You don't know what it's going to feel like, how you're going to be jostled around, or how many times you're going to lose your stomach. But at the end of the ride, you're like, yeah, let's do it again. And there's so many things like that in life. At the beginning, we're scared to death. We don't know. We're kind of apprehensive of it. But then at the end, we're like, that was awesome. Even giving our heart and life to Christ. At the beginning, it's a little unnerving because we don't know what all it's going to be like. And in the middle of this life, there's moments of, yeah, this is awesome. And then there are moments like, what did I get myself into? But in the end, man, what a celebration it's going to be. All the cool stuff we're going to be able to see and do and experience, and all of these promises that we have read about and heard about and banked on, they come true. What a glorious time that's going to be. And Solomon says, listen, there are so many things that the end is better than the beginning. And he's really talking about that the beginning of our life is good, but the end of our life can be better because of the things that we've experienced and the wisdom that we've learned. Quite like that roller coaster. We learn how to lean in on this turn and hold our breath on this turn and exhale as we're going down the hill. And at the end, we know that we've survived. Just like this whole thing that we're experiencing now. The beginning's been pretty scary, but in the end, when we learn what we can learn and leverage what we can leverage and experience what we can experience, we're going to have lots of stories to tell and lots of hope to share, and it's going to be better. It's going to be better. And so verse 9, the last part of verse 8, I want to get back to that. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Whew, that's a mouthful. There's so many directions I want to go with this, and I want to be very careful. Sorry. We need, as believers, to learn how to be patient in so many different areas. We as believers can be so opinionated and so confident in what we feel is right that we need to be patient and let things sometimes just work itself out before we get in the middle of it and put our foot in our mouth because of our pride. We need to learn to be patient. There's so many times where I get ahead of God because I feel like I am so in tune with him that I already know where he's heading with this. And so I'm going to jump ahead and get there. And the reality is I need to learn how to be patient. I need to learn how to slow down, put my pride aside, and wait on the Lord. That's hard for all of us. Solomon says a patient heart, a patient spirit is better than a proud spirit, a proud heart. And if there's any time better than any that we need to learn how to be patient, might be now, could be now. We'll just leave that there. Verse 9, do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Do not say, where were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. There's a little bit of a rebuke here, a little bit of chastisement. He says, listen, slow down. If you will slow down, you will be less likely to get angry so quick. If you will consider that maybe there's more at play here, more at work, that you don't understand the other person's situation, that maybe just because you're confident and comfortable in the situation, that the person next to you may not be confident and comfortable in that situation. And our responsibility is to be slow and patient, because if we're not, it could create an angst and anger within us that is not healthy and not responsible at all. And then he says, in fact, don't even start saying about, well, if we were back in the olden days, or if we were back in the way that we used to do it, then everything will be fine. Listen, there's nothing wrong with remembering the past and learning from the past, but I do not want to live in the past. It's kind of like that old adage of, well, if I could ever go back to high school, I would do things different. Well, why is that? Well, it's because right now in the life that we're living, we have some life experience. I am, 25 years removed from high school. And if I could go back, there are a lot of things that I would do different. But it's because I know different. I know better. It's the life that I've lived. It's me getting beyond those years. It's that beginning and the end thing that he's talking about. We don't need to go back. We need to make the change now. We need to live differently now. We can't go back and change those days. They're history. It's done. It's already written. But I can do something now. I can live better now. I can focus on doing what is right and what is good now. And I love that he talks about it. It's pointless. It is so pointless. And then verse 11 and 12, he says, wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense, but the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. So he kind of ends this little passage and portion here with this thought. He says, wisdom is good with an inheritance. In other words, with whatever we're going to get at the end of our parents' life, or whatever we get from maybe some relatives, or maybe at the end of our job, we can have some wisdom as to how to use that. But then he says, and wisdom, profitable to those who see the sun. In other words, anybody that lives is seeing the sun, And wisdom is profitable to all of us. It's not just for those that have an inheritance, because really, excuse me, all of us are going to get some type of inheritance, whether it's financial or some type of wisdom and lessons that we've learned from our families, or for the job that we've done. We have some type of inheritance, and we need to leverage that to make us better people, to send us in a direction that allows us to live life godly and holy as God has called us to live. And he talks about it. He says, but the excellence of knowledge is good. That's what gives us life. He says wisdom is so good that it's a defense, just like money can be a defense. Listen, we can buy stuff and have stuff that allows us to feel protected, but wisdom should also help us feel protected. God wants to give us wisdom. James talks about this. And he says, if you haven't gotten wisdom, then you're asking for the wrong thing, because God gives it liberally. And if you're not getting it, you're asking amiss or wrongly. And so when we ask for wisdom, God blesses us with knowledge and understanding and wisdom to know how to navigate through this life, how to do it correctly, how to do it rightly. And he does that right here. He does it through his word. Sorry, you can't see that, but he gives us how we are to live. And so it's right here in front of us already. And so to make sense of this, we have to ask. We've got to go and we've got to study. We've got to spend time. But when we learn it, now we're responsible for it. We've got to do something with it. And so he says, hey, it's really profitable for you. In fact, excellence in wisdom, in knowledge, and understanding how to live this life is so good for us. It's so healthy for us. It's better than anything else that we could ever have or say. Verse 15. I have seen everything in my days of vanity. Now he's kind of changing the tune here. He's saying, listen, if you want to talk to somebody that has experienced life to the fullest, I'm the guy. I have seen vanity up and down all over the place and in any form that you could ever think of it. I have seen everything and experienced it all. He says, there is a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Now, there's this old thing that the Old Testament kind of leads us to believe that Jesus flips on its end and turns it around. And Solomon addresses it right here, because we have always lived under the guise and under the notion that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And that's a common thing. We've always felt that way, and we still feel that way in a lot of ways. The moment something bad happens to us, we automatically assume God's against us, God's punishing us. And the reality is sometimes life's just hard and throws us a curve. And those people that are being blessed are the only ones that are doing good. That's not true, because look what Solomon says. He says, in all of my days of vanity, of everything that I've experienced, there's a just man who perishes in his righteousness. People are going to die even when they're good. They perish. Now, perish could mean just simple death. It could mean that it's an awful death. But even the righteous men are going to die. And he says, and there's a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. There are evil men that are living longer than righteous people. Well, that doesn't make sense. I thought God is supposed to preserve the righteous and take care of the wicked. Well, life is just tricky, and there are things about this life that we're not going to understand or even come close to understanding. And Solomon says, in everything that I've seen, I've noticed that even righteous people perish early and wicked people live long. Go figure. He says, do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? Interesting concept that he says here. He says, don't be overly righteous. Now, without naming names, I have met some overly righteous people in my life, and many of them have kind of left. And so I've been amazed at people that are like that are just so about their righteousness that they have lost sight of what this life is really about. And then I've met people and been around people who, because of their righteousness, have felt it okay that, yeah, there's a little sin in my life, but it'll be okay. And Solomon says, wait a second, don't be overly righteous because it can destroy you. You can become pompous, you can become arrogant, and you can place more emphasis on your righteousness than actually being holy. And then he says, don't be overly wicked, nor be foolish. He's like, don't be fooled that it's okay to just sin in your life. It's not okay to sin in your life. You need to be careful that you don't allow sin to be a part of who you are. And then he says, why should you die before your time? Now, it is believed, especially when I was reading Barnes, that at this point in time, there was a coup that was starting to overthrow the government. And he's saying, listen, whoa, slow down here. Don't put your righteousness that you think you know what's best, that you're better than everybody else. And don't think for 1 second that it's okay to go live life however you want to live. You need to find that balance of righteousness and holiness. We have a responsibility in all of this. We need to remember that we are God's created being that has fallen because of our sin and been redeemed because of what Christ did on the cross. And that we have the potential to fall at any moment. And that we need to be careful and go after God humbly, recognizing that we need him in order to maintain that. And that we need to be careful in how we live life. We need to maintain a level of holiness and righteousness that keeps us from sinning. But we're going to sin. It's going to happen. It's part of who we are and in our genetic makeup. And, there's a portion of this where we have to understand that there are people that just aren't going to understand it fully. That people are going to take it to the extreme of one or the other. And we have to be mindful of that. Not that we ignore them or avoid them, but that we don't get caught up with it. We have to be careful that we don't take our righteousness to an extreme level. We have to be careful that we don't allow our sin to overtake our lives. We need to keep them in its properly position. And he says, why should you die before your time? He's talking to really us as believers of, listen, there's a lot of laws out there that you're not going to like. And these people were living in such a way that they felt like the sins that they were doing, they weren't doing the big sins. They weren't doing the big 10. But they were breaking these little laws that could get them in legal trouble. And Solomon's trying to say, look, I'm glad for your righteousness that you're not breaking the big 10 and that you're following God. But listen, there are laws that you're breaking that you're responsible for, that you need to be following whether you like them or not. And listen, we're all over the place with this. I mean, if we want to attack right now in this whole COVID-19 thing, this is where we live. There's a lot of laws out there that I don't like. I don't like being told what to do, what not to do. But the reality is we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to follow it. We have a responsibility to do what is right, not in man's eyes, but in God's eyes. And God's pretty clear about that in Romans 13. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Doesn't mean that I can flaunt my righteousness and say, well, I know what's best. I have a responsibility to conduct myself as a believer and as a follower of God. And so he says, it's good for you to grasp this. It's good for you to understand that, hey, listen, righteous people die just like sinful people die. And sometimes sinful people last a little bit longer. Doesn't make it right or wrong, and it's not a good or bad. It's just life. But we have a responsibility to live righteously before God, and to not flaunt our righteousness, but live humbly and follow those that are around us, that are leading us in the right direction. And so it's tough. It's tough. Listen, I know we're all over the map and all in different spots, and I get it. And so we may just have to differ a little bit on that. But it's where I land on that. It's not fun. It's not what I want, but it's kind of how I read it. He says it's good that you grasp this and also not remove your hand from the other, for he who fears God will escape them all. In other words, listen, we've got to have the balance. We're on this balance beam, and we can grasp both in order to balance having a good balance to our spiritual life and a good respect and understanding that evil still lives within us, and we are to be controlled by the Spirit to keep us in a good balanced life. And he says, grasp a hold and understand both. Because those that go after God and live righteously, those are the ones that will escape the great punishment. I'm in for that. I don't know about you, but I am in for that. He says in verse 19, wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers of the city. He says, listen, wisdom is the key to all of this. And where does wisdom come from? It's the fear and acknowledgement of God. It's the knowledge and understanding of who he is and going after him and living like him and exemplifying who he is in our lives. That is wisdom. That is knowledge. That is understanding all of these things. And he says, wisdom, that's what strengthens us. That is what strengthens us. Listening to those around us, not necessarily, but wisdom in Christ, wisdom and understanding who God is. That is where our strength lies. Our strength does not lie in going to the gym. Our strength does not lie in having the best diet. Our strength does not lie in hanging around the right people. All of those things are necessary and good, but they profit little. But wisdom and knowledge and understanding and fearing God, that is where our inner strength comes from. That is why I believe wholeheartedly that our church is doing as well as it is even in these 8 weeks. Listen, the work, we talk about this all the time in our meetings, and I'm just going to be real frank and honest. The work that God has done in our church over the last 5 years has prepared us specifically, in my mind, for this time. We are strong. We are spiritually driven. We are engaged in our relationship with God. And that way, even though we are not together in the church where we all want to be, we're still connected. Why? Because God reigns in us. Our strength lies not in the church building, but in the cohesiveness in the group of people that we call Townsend Church. That is where my mind has been resting for the last 5 weeks. First 3 weeks, not so much. But the last 5 weeks is where my brain has been resting. Listen, I love the church building. I love meeting together. But being in his word, sharing the gospel, doing what we're called to do, that's the church. That is where we really thrive, and we are doing so well. It may not feel like it. It may not look the same, but church is happening, not just in Townsend, but all over the country, all over the world. Can't even tell you how much the gospel is being preached. Is it the way we want it? No. Are we in our church building? Man, I wish. But you know what? We're right here, right now. We're 63 strong together. We're well over 300 views on YouTube on a Sunday morning. That's a lot of message getting out, and that excites me. But I long for the day, cannot wait for the day when I can come out of my office, hear the chatter in the sanctuary, and see your face. I am so ready for that. However, we are doing it, and that is exciting to me. Wisdom strengthens the wise. We are being strengthened even in the midst of being separated, being quarantined. Against our wishes, against what we want. I get all that, and that's frustrating. But don't forget what's really happening. The gospel is being preached. Verse 20. For there is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. What a statement by Solomon. He kind of concludes this portion of the passage in saying, listen, even the best of guys, even the most righteous of men, sin. That's hard for us to think. But everything that we do, it is hard for us to do it with pure intentions. Even me doing this, I have to battle. Man, I hope people like it. Man, I I hope people recognize how much effort I've put into this. Sunday mornings when people are watching the videos, I'm curious as to see the comments that they make. That is a vain thing for me. It's building my own ego, and I have to battle that because I shouldn't care. It shouldn't matter. I'm preaching the gospel, and that's all that's important. But we all have intentions behind everything that we do. It's hard for us. And Solomon says, listen, even the most righteous person is going to get caught up in something. It's going to trip up somehow. Verse 21, he says, also do not take to heart. This is such a good statement for many of us. In fact, it kind of resonated with our meeting this morning. And so I'm kind of speaking specifically to our team right now. But listen to what this says. Also, do not take to heart everything people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. For many times also your own heart has known that even you have cursed others. Now, when it talks about cursing, it's not necessarily talking about cussing. It's just talking about actually just speaking badly about each other. And so, for us, in thinking about how to do church, we have so many opinions and so many people trying to encourage us in one direction and in another direction and trying to tell us how we should do it and when we should do it. And listen, it's not that easy. It's not an easy decision as to when we go back and how we're going to go back and what it's going to look like. It's just not. And so what we have to guard as the leadership of the church, what I have to guard is I have to be careful that I don't let my feelings get hurt when people say the things that they say. People mean well. They have good intentions, and they probably don't mean anything by it. But sometimes it stings. Sometimes it's hard to hear. And Solomon says, here's my interpretation as Solomon is speaking to me, Alan. You big baby, put your big boy pants on and quit taking everything to heart. They don't mean anything by it. Just hear what they have to say and not how they say it. In fact, that's something I used to tell the girls that I used to coach in basketball in Alabama. The coach that we had was great, but he was strong, man. He had a strong personality, and he would just come after those girls, and I would come behind him and not take away from what he said because what he told them was absolutely correct. But what I would say to them is, hear what he's saying, not how he's saying it. In fact, I even tell my own kids that. There's so many things in life that we need to hear what's being said and not how it's being said. Because in the world we live in, we hear how it's being said rather than what's being said. And Solomon says, listen, stop wearing your feelings on your shoulders. Don't take everything to heart. They don't mean anything by it. And even if they did, it doesn't matter anyway because they don't know. But listen to what they have to say. Give some credence. Consider what they have to say. In fact, he says the reason we should not take it to heart is because how many times, Alan, under your breath, have you said mean things about other people? How many times in your own heart, in your own mind, have you thought it? Well, I'm a little guilty of that. I speak out of anger or frustration or spite, and then I regret it. Instantly, I regret it. And so many times we do that. And Solomon's saying, hey, be careful. Be careful that you don't pass judgment and get onto people and take things to heart, because sometimes you know in your own heart when you say those things, you really didn't mean it anyway. So give people the benefit of the doubt that when they say it, don't take it to heart, because they probably didn't mean it just like you didn't mean it when you said those mean things about someone else. Verse 23. Now he's really changing the topic here. He's really kind of switching gears and kind of going at his experience and all the things that he's learned. He says this in verse 23. All this I have proved by wisdom. He says, everything that I am learning, everything that I'm sharing with you, everything that I've talked about over the last 6 chapters, I have proven through wisdom. He says, I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. He says, I'm going to prove everything. I'm going to experience everything that I can and show that I know what I'm talking about. And he says, but what I found out is I had no idea what I was talking about. He says, as for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? He's talking about wisdom. He's talking about the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God and the knowledge of God is so far beyond our understanding. We are foolish to think that we've got it all figured out. And the moment that we think we've got it all figured out, we actually figure out that we have nothing figured out. And that's what Solomon's talking about. He says, it's so far out there, who can figure it out? He says, I applied my heart to know. Here's what he says. We set goals in our life, and he says, here's what I've done. I set in my heart to go after wisdom and knowledge to figure it out. That was my goal in life. It wasn't to amass all this stuff. It wasn't to have all the women and have all the money. I wanted to understand what life was all about. That's what I set out to do. And here's what he says. I applied my heart to know, to search and seek out wisdom and the reason of things. I wanted to understand why everything happened. To know the wickedness of folly. I wanted to know what was on the other side of everything enjoyable and pleasurable in this world. I wanted to know it. He said, even of foolishness and madness, and I find more bitter than death, the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are fetters, he who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be trapped by her. He said, out of all the things that I've experienced, women was the worst for me. He said, I found that it was more bitter than death. That's a big statement. Now, he's not coming down on women. He's not coming down on what they add to this world. What he's coming down on is what he thought they were about, what he thought they were here for. And he said, every one that I experienced, and he talks about the 1,000 women that he had. He's like, every one I just added to the next because they always came up short from what I was looking for. He said, they added so much stress and so much problems to me. He said, but those that please God, those that go after God, will escape that pleasure-seeking ideal because they're going after God in the right way, and they will see women for the way that God intended them to be seen, is what he's getting at. And he says, here's what I've found, says the preacher. Adding one thing to the other to find out the reason which my soul still seeks, but I cannot find. One man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all these I have not found. Wow. He says, here's what I found. Here's where I land. Adding one thing after the other to find the reason which my soul still seeks and I cannot find. He says, after the 1,000 women that I have tried to put in front of me to satisfy that thing that I'm trying to find, I couldn't find one. Because I'm still seeking. He says, but there's only been one person that I've put in front of me that has been that. And I would venture to say that was God. What a phenomenal conclusion. He says, out of all the things that I thought were going to bring me joy, none of it did. There's only been one out of 1,000, one man that has brought me the joy. He says, truly, this only I have found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. He concludes this chapter with an amazing thought. He says, listen, here's what I figured out. God originally made us upright, but we messed it up. There's a point at which in here he talks about, refers to the verse that only God can straighten that which is crooked. We think we can straighten it out. We think we can figure it out, but only God is the one that can straighten out what is crooked because he's the only one that can understand it and see it. And so in this moment, at the end of chapter 7, in this writing of statements, Solomon simply says, you know what I figured out? God started this thing off right. We've messed it up. And in our journey to try to right the wrong, to straighten the crooked, which only can be straightened and made right by God, we try to fill it with all of these other things that are vain. They are useless and a waste of time. But the man that goes after God, that seeks after him, will avoid all of this stuff and seek righteousness and experience it the way God meant for us to experience this life. Well, that, my friend, concludes chapter 7. And what a powerful chapter that is absolutely chock full of so much stuff. I would encourage you, go back and study this again. There are so many applicable thoughts to this day and time that we're living in that I would encourage you. We need to consider that, you know what? Maybe we don't know what's best. Maybe this is a waiting, patient time for us of waiting on God to do, because we don't know what's at work behind the scenes of what he's trying to accomplish. and we need to be patient. But in our patience and in our waiting, we need to be faithful and responsible for what God has already called us to do, and that is to live righteously before all men. So I know I didn't get to a lot of the thoughts tonight, and I apologize for that, but I knew this chapter was so jammed-packed that I really wanted to focus on that. And so I appreciate all of you guys tuning in over there and chiming in. And so I'm not going to read them tonight just because I don't want to leave anybody out, but I appreciate you guys chiming in. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and close this time with some prayer. Please be praying for George Baker. That is actually Pastor Charlie's uncle. He is not doing well. He is really having a hard time. He does not have COVID, but he's having some really, really tough issues. And he is in the hospital right now. So please be praying for him. We have had 2 people in our church that I am very aware of that have tested positive for the coronavirus. One that is currently fighting it, one that I believe has healed up from it. I know we've had a lot of friends and a lot of relatives and a lot of coworkers that we have heard of that have been dealing with it. But please be praying for George, the 2 in our church that have been infected by it, those that are working with those patients, the doctors, the leaders, the people that are sick and infected by this. Please be praying for our shut-ins, our elderly. It's just a tough time, and it's a very weird time for us in this day and age. And so please be praying about that. Don't forget tomorrow's International Day of Prayer. Or the National Day of Prayer. Please tune in and join that. I would encourage you to do that. We're going to lift up Jill, Terry Stoneburner's daughter. She is in the hospital as well. It's tough, man. It is a tough space to be in. And so I'm going to go ahead and pray. While I'm praying, I will probably open my eyes just to see if there are any that pop up in the comment section. So while I'm praying, if there's a little bit of lag, go ahead and pop them in there. I will try to throw them in toward the end of my prayer. So let's pray and conclude our time together. God, I thank you for being such a thorough God. Lord, you do not skip over anything. You do not cut corners. You're very thorough. And that is encouraging to me. And I appreciate you bringing that to my mind. I just ask that you be with those that are really having a hard time. Lord, I'm reminded of Tom Shanahan. Thank you, Charlie. Who is really struggling with his chemo treatments for his throat cancer. And God, I just ask that you relieve him of some of the things that he's having to deal with. And Lord, I know he's ready to see you. He is not scared to die. I know he doesn't want to leave his wife. Lord, I know he's ready to see you. And so you do what is best and what is right. Lord, I thank you for Uncle George, who has been such an encouragement in our church. But Lord, he is having such a hard time. And I pray that you would allow him to rest in you, that you relieve him of the things that he's dealing with. Give the doctors wisdom to be able to know what is going on and be able to treat him. Lord, thank you for the one that has recuperated from the coronavirus, but we ask that you be with the one that is still fighting it, with our friends and our families and our coworkers and our neighbors that are fighting the virus or may have been infected. Lord, I ask that you be with them and help them. Lord, I pray for Jill as she is still in the hospital. And Lord, I pray that you would just continue to work not only physically in her life, but emotionally and spiritually in her life as well, that you would do a great work, that you would reveal yourself to her in such a way that it would just turn her heart towards you. Lord, I thank you for those that are on the front lines, that are doing a great work, that are just fighting the good fight. I pray that you would give them energy and passion and concern and strength of will to continue doing what they're doing. Protect them in a huge way, God, to keep them from getting sick. Give the leaders of not only our state and of our country, but of our world wisdom as to what is best for each individual state and county and city and town and nation and world. God, just help us to know. Lord, I ask specifically for us as leadership in our church to know what is best and safe and efficient for our people for rejoining our church services. Give us wisdom as to know what is best. Thank you for how awesome you are. Thank you for just being great. God, thank you for the new baby Luke that is in this world from Morgan and Kaysen. We just ask for health for the baby and for Morgan. Just some minor complications that are there with the low blood sugar on Luke and high blood pressure for Morgan. God, I pray that you would just intervene there. Be big, be huge, again, take this opportunity to reveal yourself in big ways there. We've got a young girl in ICU, 16. God, what a scary time, not only for her, but for her parents and her friends and family. God, I pray that you would just be with them and wrap your loving arms around them and give Dawn a great opportunity to share truth and love through Christ to them. Lord, we know that you are bigger than this. We know that you are more than able and willing to eradicate it. But God, you're allowing it. And as hard for us to comprehend as that is, help us to leverage this as an opportunity to promote you and your gospel. May you continue to be glorified. May you continue to be honored by how we live, how we conduct ourselves as believers in this world of chaos, and how we follow you. Thank you for all that you do in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in, and check out our video tomorrow. Again, it's not a funny one. It's a little more on the serious side, but I pray that it will be an encouragement to you. And then we will see you certainly on Sunday. God bless you. Have a great night.